Good morning, everybody. The reading this morning is taken from John's Gospel, chapter 5, verses 1 to 15. John 5, 1 to 15. And it concerns the healing at the pool. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the Sheep Gate a pool which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who'd been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you're well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
This is where we do the great exchange of the mask for the glasses. Can't be worn together, of course. Good morning. Thank you, Mark. So my name's Emma, and I've had a bit of an object lesson this week. If you were watching for the chat at the beginning of the service, just been ill for about 10 days, still feeling a bit ropey and a bit tired and not very well, but it wasn't very pleasant or convenient to be poorly for 10 days. I don't think I'd do very well being ill for 38 years. 38 years? So of the signs of John's Gospel, this is the third one, and it demonstrates Jesus' power to heal the disabled man by the pool. So it starts off the account, Jesus goes up to this group of people sat by a pool, and he says to one man, he realises he's been ill for 38 years, and he says, "Do you want to get well?" A direct question, but a strange question, isn't it? To ask somebody who's been disabled and waiting for an opportunity to be healed, isn't it obvious that he wants to be healed? Isn't the very fact that he's there enough to say that he wants to be well? Jesus likes to ask questions. In fact, if you look at the New Testament, he asked 307 questions. And as the slide says, he only directly answered 8. In real life, it was probably hundreds more, wasn't it? Because we only have a snapshot in the New Testament of Jesus' life. But we think, I know I do anyway, as Christians, that we've got to have all the answers to every question that we're asked. And yet Jesus, who, as we know, is the answer to every question. If you're in Sunday school particularly, every answer is Jesus. He didn't answer questions so much as he asked questions. He asked them. Why does he ask so many questions? Does he not know the answer? Of course he knows the answer. Jesus is the answer. He is the Word. He knows it more than we do. He knows what we're thinking before we even start to answer. So why does he ask so many questions? Well, I believe he asks them for our benefit, to make us think, to challenge us, to take us out of our comfort area, make us wrestle with things. Because when we wrestle with something, it makes us stronger. When I was growing up, I just accepted the Bible at face value. Everything I was taught, I believed, no questions asked, literally. But when I studied A-levels, I was doing A-level religion and philosophy. And we looked at stuff like Noah's Ark, and I was absolutely ripped apart for just believing the account of Noah's Ark. It had never occurred to me to question it, or to think about how silly it sounds to somebody who's not grown up with that. So I had to wrestle with things, I had to ask questions, I had to study. Now I still believe, but now I know what I believe and I know why I believe it. And so when somebody comes to me and says, "You don't believe that, do you?" I'm like, "Yes, and here's the proof, and this is why I believe it's true," because I've wrestled with it. There's difficult questions to do with our faith, to do with life, to do with what God is doing, and we need to wrestle with these things ourselves so that we can know what we believe and why we believe it, but we need to ask the right questions. Nobody really asks questions anymore, do they? If you look at social media, we just make statements. We have our opinions and we say things. We surround ourselves with like-minded people who think the same as us and never really challenge us. We read things and believe them because it says it on Facebook, or it says it on Instagram, or it says it on the news, without really asking the right questions. Why do we believe what we believe? Why is this true? The man in our passage today surrounded himself with a great number of disabled people. One of my questions is, did Jesus just ignore everybody else? Did he heal anybody else? He doesn't say that he did, and the account says he slipped away into the crowd, so we're assuming that he didn't. So he didn't treat everybody the same. He didn't ask the same questions of everybody. He singled this man out. But the people he surrounded himself with, everybody was in the same boat. They were all in the same place, all waiting for a miracle to happen. You know, this can be a good thing, can't it? They say birds of a feather flock together. We surround ourselves with people who are like us. But how different would it have been if there'd been somebody there asking questions? It's a long time to be there, isn't it? Why are we all waiting here? What else could we be doing to be productive in our lives? Is there some other option? Is there something else we can do? Do we have to just lie here and wait? Let's be people who ask questions, not to be argumentative, but to find the truth, to question, to challenge, to think things through. There's a verse missing from this passage, the eagle-eyed among you might have noticed. Verse 4 is not in there, because there's some question as to whether it was in the original text or not, but it was added to give a little explanation as to why all the sick people were there. It says this: "From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had." So the stirring of the water was from time to time. There was no once a month or every week or twice a year. It was just as and when. We don't know how regularly it happened. So it was a gamble for them to just stay there and wait. Assumably, the number of disabled people around the pool are going to get more and more, not less and less. If it happened every now and again, as one person gets healed at a time. Also, assumably, because they weren't British, there probably wasn't a nice orderly queue waiting to get into the pool when the water stirred. No, you first. No, you here longer. No, you wait. It would have been every man for himself. Let's get in there. Let's be the first person into the water. Now, in my mind, when I think about this passage, it was a pool with a wall around it, like a pond, essentially. And so he needed somebody to help him into the pool. But the first slide I showed was like a big swimming pool on the same level. So, in my mind, why couldn't he have just rolled in? But I guess he couldn't, and that's why he was waiting for somebody to help him. So, a question, because it's about questions. So let's ask questions. Let's think about the passage. The man was surrounded by people who were the same as him, all in the same boat. Nobody was trying to do anything different. What kind of people am I surrounding myself with? Are they encouraging me to walk closer with the Lord, to go higher, to challenge myself and keep going on despite difficulty? Or are they perhaps people who are negative and grumbling and complaining and conspiracy theories? What kind of people am I surrounding myself with? So, what do you want me to do for you today is the next slide. I believe that Jesus is here with us this morning by his Holy Spirit, and he says, what do you want me to do for you today? You know, we're all different, aren't we? We're all in different circumstances, we've all got different challenges. I think my answer would be, after 10 months of madness, to have a day off in a spa, relaxing and having peace and quiet. Would anybody else like to join me? Oh, no, not you. Okay, that's fine, that's good. But yes, realistically, I'd probably ask for COVID-19 to be eradicated. I want soft play open again, to be honest. You know, a nice place to go for a coffee, somewhere to just take the children out to burn off some energy. I think for most of us it would be that we would be well, or that we'd stay well, the same for our families. But what question is Jesus asking me today? And what is my response? You just have a moment, just think, just have a moment and just say, what are you asking me today? And you probably get a thought come into your mind and you go, okay. Verse 7 says, Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me. Does anybody watch Piers Morgan in the morning? On, I don't even know what it's called now, Good Morning, whatever it is, the morning news programme. I have it on sometimes, just, I don't really know why actually, because it winds me up. But this man, in response to a direct question, is totally evasive in the style of the politicians squirming under Piers Morgan's scrutiny. He's like, do you want to get well? Well, there's nobody here to help me into the water. Well, it was a direct question. All you had to say was yes or no. Why didn't he just say yes? If he was a British teenager, he would have probably replied in a sarcastic way, like, no, I'm just here for a laugh, mate, obviously. You know, is it possible that he'd been ill that long that he just got used to being in this position and hadn't got a clue how to live any other way? You know, if he's healed, what happens? What does he do for money? How does he live? Where does he live? It's probably quite scary, really, to think what life could be after healing, after all of that time. How long had he been sitting by the pool, dependent on somebody else to get him out of his predicament? You know, realistically, there's always going to be somebody who can get into the pool before him. And yet, he didn't do anything different. His only hope was almost no hope at all. You know, there's a saying, if we do what we've always done, we get what we've always got. 38 years, he did what he'd always done and he got what he's always got, which is just to stay there. You know, it's a question maybe to us today, what could you do differently? If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling in a ditch, if you're feeling hopeless, what could you do differently? This man is totally reliant on people, on charity, on help from other people. I'm sure at first it must have been humbling, difficult, challenging, totally frustrating. But is there a point at which he became comfortable on his reliance on other people? Let's face it, he's got no responsibilities, he doesn't have to work, there are no expectations of him. It seems insane that he wouldn't want to be well for things to be different and to change. But I have spoken to homeless people in similar situations, totally reliant on people for everything, and yet they don't want anything to change. They prefer the life of no responsibility, of other people providing for them. And so I ask a difficult question. Are we so used to our present troubles that we somehow find comfort in them? Who are we without being ill, without having this disability, without grieving, without having this difficult circumstance? Is there a point at which we get used to our troubles, enjoy the attention maybe, become dependent on help from others? Is it possible that this man felt guilty that he was still there, and his answer was a defensive one, making excuses? Verse 8 says, Then Jesus said to him, Get up, pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured, he picked up his mat and walked. I love the fact that there is no preamble here, is there? There's no begging God, it's just straightforward. He just says, get up and walk, and he was healed instantly. Just a command. I think there's so much mystery surrounding healing, And so many people have such strong opinions on both sides of the equation that I think sometimes we get a bit scared about it. We may be so frightened of being disappointed and let down that we don't even pray for healing anymore. I think that there is a sense that what we believe about healing reflects what we think about God and about our relationship with him. And maybe that's a good thing to discuss in our life groups, maybe. I know we've discussed healing a few times in our life group, and it's been good. Personally, I believe in healing. I believe in angels. I believe that there isn't necessarily a formula for healing. Every time Jesus heals in the New Testament, it's a different way. There's a command, or he does something practical, or there's different things. I don't think there are magic words that have to be said. I can't see in this passage that there is a basis for the person being healed to have a certain level of faith. He didn't even know who Jesus was. All I know is that Jesus had compassion and he had the power and the ability to heal. And as far as I'm concerned, that is still the same today. Jesus has compassion. Jesus has the power. Jesus has the ability. We've got in our family at least 3 stories of healing. I'm going to share 2 of them with you today. The first one features my dad, the inimitable Jim Johnson. When Dad was a younger man, I originally put a much younger man, but I thought he might be offended, so a younger man, he was admitted into Astley Hospital with a collapsed lung. So this happened when he was leading a service in Strangeways Prison with a band he was with at the time. Now, I don't remember all the details because I was only at primary school, but I do remember it was, if any of you've been to Dam House, there's a pond there, and that pond was completely frozen over. So it was January, I think. There was snow everywhere, and he was in hospital for a while. And I remember him saying that he had a drain inserted to try and keep his lung inflated, but it was in the wrong place, so it wasn't working. And during the night, an angel came and moved the drain to the place it should be, and it started to do the job. And he started to get better from that moment. He came home well and sporting a beard, which, as you all know, he's quite famous for, his beard, and he still has it. Now, you might find that a bit far-fetched, but that is what happened. That is his testimony. And there is power in that testimony. Now, another testimony I'm going to ask Adam for help with, because whenever I try and read this out, I start crying, and that's just not a good look. So the next testimony is when I found out that I was pregnant with Isaac, who's my 16-year-old. Tracy, my sister, found out that her middle son Jacob was desperately poorly at 9 months old. And I took this extract from her book, which is due to be published soon.
Dr. Gladman looked totally apologetic as he explained that they could do nothing for him. His heart was so deformed. He needed a heart and lung transplant, and that was a procedure that was too risky to perform in babies. We sat in silence. It was after the meeting. I noticed that we'd been taken to the Rainbow Room, the place that you go to when you're told that your child is dying or has gone. Over the next few days, I would ask question after question about whether we would take him home to die, how long he'd have, will he have to stay on oxygen? The answers weren't there. His complications were so complex. There hadn't been a child with the same diagnosis grow to adulthood, so they erred on the negative. His heart hadn't formed properly, and he had no arteries that went into his lungs. He was 9 months old and blue. The doctor said he probably wouldn't reach his first birthday. He had no life expectancy. He was not going to make it to school, etc. We prayed, you prayed, and God answered.
Thank you for that, Adam. Slide number 6. The first one I showed was him at 18 months, the day before his operation. This was one of his next operations when he was a bit older, and I had to put the one with his smiley face on because he's so beautiful, just so it wasn't too depressing. Throughout his life, he's had to undergo major surgery, invasive surgeries, and at times it's been very hairy. He's been extremely poorly, but on the whole, he's been well. He's done sport, he's done karate, he's done dancing, he's been full of beans. And last week, he celebrated his 18th birthday, which is amazing. How amazing is that? It's a miracle he even reached his first birthday. He's baffled doctors and surgeons all his life. But Tracy, in particular, has never stopped praying. And his life is a miracle. As far as I'm concerned, it's a demonstration of God's healing power. There was no hope. There was nothing they could do. And here he is, 18 years old. As I mentioned, Tracy's written a book about his amazing life journey, which has been accepted for publishing. But if you're going to read it with a tissue or a box off. So there's a verse in Revelation 12:11 that says, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. It's so powerful when we've got stories of healing and miracles and answered prayers, because it builds faith and expectation, doesn't it? If you don't know anybody who's ever been healed and you've never heard of any miracles, then your expectation is going to be so low. But I know of so many people who have had miraculous answers to prayer and healings. And I believe there are people who are listening today who desperately need a touch from God, who are in despair, who are feeling like there is no hope. Jesus is the same yesterday, today and forever. He's never changed. That same Jesus who said, get up, pick up your mat and walk. He's still with us today. And I believe that he's present to heal. And I believe that he wants to do that today. So the next verse is verse 9, and it says, the day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who'd been healed, it is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. So it was against the law to carry one's mat on the Sabbath, although this isn't a law that was given to Moses, it was added afterwards, so it's not directly from the Lord. I've been studying Sabbath for a couple of years now, and I've kind of keep coming to a conclusion, and I keep trying to live, every week I have a day of Sabbath and I don't do anything at all. Anybody who has a home knows that's almost impossible to do. To do absolutely nothing that could constitute work for a full 24 hours. And I just felt guilty and stressed every week that I'd not managed to do it, put the dishwasher on or the washing machine or making food or whatever it might be. And I preached about Sabbath just before Christmas, and I was convinced before I spoke exactly what I thought about it. But then one verse changed my whole perspective, and it was one from Colossians 2 verse 16, and it said, therefore do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. The Sabbath in the Old Testament was so strict that if you broke it, so you did anything that looked like work, you could be put to death. Imagine that. Like, most of us struggle to stop doing something for a few hours, but to be forced to rest for 24 hours to the point where you'd be murdered if you didn't, it's crazy, isn't it, to imagine that kind of life. And it wasn't a freedom thing. It wasn't, oh, brilliant, I get a day off. It was a weight of responsibility. It was being tied up with legalism and rules and regulations. But the reason that the Sabbath was put in place was for our benefit. It wasn't so that we were weighed down. It was so that God knew, he made us. He knows that we need time to rest. We need time to stop. We need time away from all the craziness, whether it's on our phone or our computers, the emails, the things that we're always attached to, are always available. We need time to just be and to spend time with him for our benefit. Not so that we tick a box and go, yes, we've done that. I've been a good Christian today. I've stopped. But it's a pattern. Work 6 days, rest 1 day. It isn't rocket science. It's regain your strength mentally and physically. Spend time with Father God and go back to work refreshed, stronger, happier. The new covenant did away with the rules. He still expected us to rest, but it's not anymore a law, a rule. Jesus established a new regime. No longer have we got rules about what we can eat, how we celebrate festivals, how we spend our Sabbath. And in this passage, Jesus is once again winding up the religious spirits, isn't he? He's like going, you've missed the point again. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. God's plan is that we work from rest, not that we work to the point where we're exhausted and have to rest from work. To spend time with him, to do things that nourish us and heal us, spirit, soul and body. Do things we enjoy. Why shouldn't the man who's never been able to carry his own mat for 38 years not carry his mat on the Sabbath? That must have been a thing of joy in itself, mustn't it? Have we had the slide with the verse on it, Adam? It says, to me, the Matthew 11:28-30 just sums up what Sabbath is really now. It's come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. You know, it's not specifically about Sabbath, but isn't that kind of the essence of it, that we come away and we get restored? So, slide 9. How does this sign in John's Gospel point to Jesus? It shows his authority, his power, his ability and willingness to heal, challenging religious spirits. It shows us that Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath, which the other 3 Gospels give him that title, actually. John doesn't. Jesus states in verse 24, which is a bit further down in the passage, he says, "Whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life." I believe John's overall purpose in writing this is to encourage us to believe. Just believe that these things are possible. Believe just happens to be my word for the year. Thankfully, it's not patience like it was last year. Believe that Jesus has the power to heal. Believe that Jesus has the power to change us. Believe that he can transform our situations, however hopeless they might seem. Believe. And finally, slide 10. What is my response to Jesus? The man who was healed, he has a strange response in a way, because he doesn't react like other people in the New Testament was healed. He didn't thank Jesus. He didn't worship him. He doesn't say that he suddenly developed a faith in Jesus. In fact, he didn't really know, and as soon as Jesus spoke to him and he realised who he was, he went to the officials and told them it was Jesus. He betrayed him. He had a different reaction to what we'd expect. Jesus works in our lives in myriad ways. We pray, he answers, but then what is our response? Is it to move straight on to the next prayer request? Right, thanks, that's sorted now, next. Or do we stop and say thank you? Thank you for answering that prayer. Thank you that I'm able to stand here and preach when I probably couldn't have done it 2 days ago. Thank you that I feel better. Thank you that you've provided for my family. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's worship him. Let's say thank you. What question is Jesus asking us today, and what is our response to him? Last 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 words. Believe in Jesus. Believe in Jesus and respond to him. Thank you.